Have you ever witnessed a moment so outrageous it sent chills down your spine, only to watch destiny serve up swift and powerful justice? Picture this. A determined black disabled female veteran, Emma Davis, rolling through her day in a small, unassuming town. She's minding her own business, carrying the invisible weight of service and sacrifice. Suddenly, a group of cruel local bullies decides she's the perfect target for their twisted amusement. They hurl insults, sneers, and threats. Little do they know Emma has an unbreakable bond with the United States Marines, stationed nearby. What happens next will restore your faith in true, unwavering honor. Emma Davis was born and raised in a working-class neighborhood of Charlotte, North Carolina. Her mother, Marjorie Davis, was a school teacher known for her fierce love of education and unshakable moral compass. Her father, Ronald Davis, was a police officer who believed in duty and community service. Emma grew up between these two powerful influences, her mother's unwavering dedication to teaching and her father's courageous commitment to protecting the innocent. Together, they instilled in Emma a blend of intellectual curiosity and an inherent sense of justice. From an early age, Emma wanted to do something that made a difference. While most teenagers obsessed over social media or hanging out at the mall, Emma volunteered at the local library and joined a community service club that cleaned neighborhood parks. It didn't seem like much to others her age, but Emma took pride in it. She had an uncanny ability to connect with people from all walks of life, an empathy that would define her future. Her parents recognized her potential and encouraged Emma to explore her interests. She devoured books about historical figures who broke barriers, particularly those involving women of color. Harriet Tubman and Rosa Parks became her heroes. Yet Emma's curiosity was not limited to activism. She was also drawn to the idea of serving her country. The stories of her grandfather, a World War II veteran, lit a spark inside her. By the time she turned 18, Emma had set her heart on joining the military to become part of something greater than herself. Upon finishing high school with honors, Emma found herself facing the same question as many of her classmates, college or the workforce. For Emma, the choice felt more profound. She wanted to follow in her grandfather's footsteps, but she also knew how the world sometimes treated women of color who dared to break into male-dominated spaces. Despite any reservations, Emma's resolve was firm. She would become a soldier. Her parents gave their blessings, albeit with some caution. They reminded Emma of the challenges ahead, sexism, racism, and the harsh realities of war. Yet they also reminded her she was made of tough stuff. She'd inherited their resilience and dedication. She told them she wanted to be in the army, specifically focusing on combat support roles. Her ultimate goal was to become a field medic. From Emma's perspective, there was no greater honor than tending to wounded comrades. As Emma started basic training, she quickly discovered how rigorous the Army's demands could be. She was tested physically, mentally, and emotionally. During obstacle courses, there were days she thought her body would give out, but Emma refused to quit. The voices of every ancestor who struggled for her right to stand there propelled her forward. She made friends across the racial and gender spectrum, brothers and sisters in arms. By the time she finished advanced individual training to become a medic, Emma stood proud as one of the top graduates in her class. Emma's first deployment came 2 years after she joined. Stationed in Afghanistan, she served in a forward operating base, FOB, near Kandahar. Her role as a combat medic placed her on the front lines of saving lives. The desert sun, the constant threat of IEDs, and the heartbreak of wounded comrades tested her grit day in and day out. Despite the challenges, Emma rose to the occasion. Each rescue or life saved reinforced her conviction that she was in the right place doing exactly what she was meant to do. But war is unforgiving. One fateful day, Emma's unit came under an intense ambush while on a convoy mission. Enemy fire poured down from the surrounding hills, and an RPG struck the lead vehicle, triggering chaos. In the midst of the gunfire and thick smoke, Emma rushed to administer critical aid to a wounded soldier, ignoring the bullets whizzing by. Then, a deafening explosion tore through the air. An IED on the roadside detonated too close, and Emma was caught in the blast. When she woke up, her life had changed forever. She was on a medevac helicopter, drifting in and out of consciousness. Sharp pain radiated from her legs, and she vaguely registered the frantic shouts of other medics. She thought of her family, of her home, and of how everything might never be the same again. Despite her training, fear welled up in Emma. The unknown future she now faced loomed dark and uncertain. Emma's injuries were severe. By the time she arrived stateside at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, doctors had to break the news she would never walk again. The roadside bomb had caused irreparable damage to her spinal cord. Emma's family stood by her bedside as she processed the devastating reality. She was alive, but confined to a wheelchair. Those early days in rehabilitation were some of Emma's hardest. As a dedicated soldier and avid volunteer, she had always been active. Now she had to learn to maneuver a wheelchair, rely on others for assistance, and navigate the bureaucracy of medical discharge. Mentally, she was in a battle with self-doubt, depression, and trauma from her experiences overseas. Physically, she was learning how to rebuild her muscles, her stamina, and a new sense of normal. But Emma was never one to succumb to defeat. She drew on her inner well of resilience, supported by the unwavering love of her parents. Her father took time off from the police force to be with her during her most challenging weeks of therapy, and her mother made sure Emma was surrounded by books to keep her mind strong. Over time, Emma found a new sense of purpose, helping other wounded veterans adjust to life after injury. She discovered that her empathy and medical background made her an excellent volunteer in peer support programs. Her contributions at Walter Reed did not go unnoticed. After months of intensive rehabilitation, Emma was medically retired from the army. While she was proud of her service, she felt a pang of loss every day. No longer able to wear the uniform she cherished, Emma found herself asking, "Where do I go from here?" The answer arrived unexpectedly when a friend from her unit, Sergeant Ava Henderson, recommended Crystal Falls, a small town near Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Ava explained it was a place with a tight-knit military community, a slower pace of life and resources for disabled veterans. Emma decided to visit Crystal Falls. She found a calm and friendly environment that felt close to the camaraderie she had known in the army. The local Veterans Center was well-staffed, offering everything from job placement assistance to physical therapy and group counseling sessions. The scenic nature trails, winding through tall pine forests, gave Emma a sense of peace and reflection. Before she knew it, Emma had secured a small but cozy apartment in Crystal Falls. She began volunteering at the local VA clinic, offering emotional support and medical advice to fellow veterans. She quickly became a beloved figure, known not just for her wheelchair, but for her warm spirit and tireless dedication. People around the clinic started calling her Doc, out of respect for her combat medic background. In a town where retired Marines, sailors, and soldiers dotted every street corner, Emma found a sense of belonging she never thought she'd experience again. Crystal Falls was not without its flaws. While most of the local residents were kind, supportive, and understanding particularly of veterans, there was a small but vocal contingent that had come to resent the town's strong military presence. Over the years, newcomers had driven up housing costs, and some locals blamed it on the influx of service members and veterans. They grumbled that their once quiet town had changed too much too fast. Emma unfortunately caught the attention of a handful of bitter townspeople. She was everything they disliked, not just a new face, but a disabled black woman who seemed to garner a lot of respect from the community. They saw how people from the local Marine base would greet her warmly, how the VA staff praised her volunteer work, and how quickly she was welcomed by the majority of local residents. For reasons rooted in prejudice and resentment, they targeted Emma with passive-aggressive hostility. In the months following her arrival, Emma noticed small signs that not everyone embraced her presence. Sometimes she'd find nasty notes on her car, calling her slurs notes she refused to share with anyone for fear of rocking the boat. On other occasions, she'd see people staring daggers at her when she was out in town. She tried to ignore it, but there was an undercurrent of tension that made the hairs on her neck stand up. Emma thought she could handle it alone. She had faced far worse on the battlefield. One brisk autumn morning, Emma wheeled herself down to the Old Oak Diner, a local favorite known for its hearty pancakes and strong coffee. She had been craving something sweet all week and was eager to enjoy a relaxing breakfast before heading to the VA clinic. As she approached the door, she noticed a group of 3 men standing outside, smoking cigarettes and laughing loudly. Their laughter stopped abruptly when they saw her. One of them, a bearded man with a patchy flannel jacket, stared at Emma for a long moment before muttering something under his breath. She tried to ignore it, focusing on maneuvering her wheelchair over the door threshold. Inside, the warm smell of butter and syrup enveloped her senses, and for a moment, she felt safe. She took a seat at a table by the window. Moments later, the group of men entered the diner, occupying a nearby booth. Emma kept her eyes on the menu, trying not to make eye contact. She hoped they would simply ignore her. Yet she couldn't help but feel an unsettling weight in the air. The waitress approached, and Emma ordered her pancakes. As the men's voices grew louder behind her, Emma's appetite began to wane. She forced a smile when her plate arrived, but something told her that meal would not be as peaceful as she'd hoped. Halfway through her pancakes, Emma heard them mention her. "Think she's some big shot because she was in the army," a scratchy male voice said. Another man chimed in. "She's got them Marines always looking after her. She's too good for this place." Emma felt her stomach tighten. The men weren't even trying to be discreet. A quick glance at the rest of the diner revealed that other patrons were either ignoring the scene or were too fearful to intervene. Emma decided the best course of action was to remain calm and not engage. She'd seen bullies before. She knew they thrived on confrontation. But as the minutes passed, their comments became more pointed, eventually taking on a racial tinge. Typical one said, always looking for a handout. "Ain't that right, soldier girl?" That was it. Emma felt her heart pounding. Her dignity refused to let her stay silent. She turned her wheelchair around to face them. With a steady voice, she said, "I'm only going to say this once. If you have something to say to me, say it to my face. Otherwise, please let me finish my meal in peace." Her words seemed to catch them off guard. The men glanced at each other before the bearded one locked eyes with her, a sneer curling his lip. Emma steeled herself, wondering if this was about to escalate beyond words. Instead of backing off, the bearded man, who went by the name Trent, stood up and sauntered over to Emma's table. His 2 buddies followed. One was a lanky man with a faded baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, and the other was a stocky individual with a perpetual scowl. They surrounded Emma's wheelchair, creating an intimidating wall of hostility. Trent leaned down until his face was uncomfortably close to hers. "You think you can come into this town and act like you own the place. Just because you served doesn't make you special." He sneered. The stench of stale cigarettes enveloped Emma, making her gag. She clenched her fists on her lap, but maintained her composure. "I'm just trying to live my life," Emma replied evenly. "I volunteered to serve my country just like thousands of others. I'm not asking for special treatment." Trent's buddies exchanged mocking looks. "We don't want to hear your sob story," the stocky one spat. The diner had grown eerily silent, save for the hiss of the coffee maker. No one moved to stop them. Fear or apathy held the bystanders in a vice. Emma's instincts, honed from her time in combat, told her that this situation could turn violent. Yet she also knew that physically, she was at a disadvantage. The only thing she could rely on was her courage and the slim hope that the diner staff would intervene. But no one did. Just as Trent's hand twitched, Emma suspected he was about to shove her wheelchair. Someone from behind the counter finally spoke up. It was Darlene, the owner of the Old Oak Diner, a tough woman in her 60s who had seen her share of dust-ups. "That's enough, Trent," she hollered. "If you ain't gonna be civil, you boys can take it outside. I won't have you harassing my customers." Trent shot her a glare that could curdle milk, but he slowly straightened. His buddies cracked their knuckles, still eyeing Emma with a mix of anger and contempt. "We ain't done with you," Trent hissed under his breath before turning back to the booth to grab his jacket. They left the diner, tossing a few bills on the table without calculating the proper tip. Emma exhaled shakily, relief washing over her. She glanced around, noticing that most of the patrons were studiously avoiding eye contact. "Thank you, Emma," said softly to Darlene, who nodded and approached. "I'm sorry, hon," Darlene replied, her face a mask of concern. "I've known them fellas since they were kids, but I never seen them go after someone like that. You take care now." Emma nodded gratefully, quickly finishing the rest of her breakfast before exiting. As she left, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far more sinister. Over the next few days, Emma tried to go about her life as usual, volunteering at the VA clinic, grabbing groceries, attending physical therapy sessions. But she discovered that Trent and his gang, emboldened by their encounter at the diner, had taken their hostility to the next level. When Emma wheeled out of the grocery store one afternoon, she found her car had been keyed a large scratch, spelling out an ugly slur across the door. Another time she returned home from the clinic to find a note taped to her door. "Go back where you came from." Worse yet, she sometimes spotted Trent and his friends loitering near her apartment building. They never confronted her directly in public spaces, filled with potential witnesses, but their presence was enough to send an unsettling message. "We know where you live." Emma reported the keyed car to the police, but there was little they could do without concrete evidence of who had done it. She had a sinking feeling that the local authorities were hesitant to get involved in any feud between locals and a new resident, no matter how blatant the harassment. Every night, Emma locked her doors and double-checked her windows, her mind swirling with memories of war zones where danger lurked around every corner. She couldn't believe she was feeling the same kind of apprehension in small-town North Carolina. Despite her fear, Emma vowed not to be intimidated out of the life she was building. She had faced bombs and bullets. She could face narrow-minded bullies. Even though Emma tried to keep her troubles low-key, word eventually reached the local veterans network, Sergeant Ava Henderson. The friend who'd recommended Crystal Falls was the first to approach Emma with concern. "I heard rumors you've been having trouble," she said one afternoon at the VA clinic. Emma initially tried to brush it off, but Ava insisted she come clean. With a resigned sigh, Emma shared the details. The diner incident, the vandalized car, the chilling notes. Ava's face darkened with anger. "You shouldn't have to deal with this alone. Let me talk to a few Marines I know on Camp Lejeune. They're always willing to help out a fellow service member in need." "Even if your army," Ava added with a teasing grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I appreciate it," Emma replied, "but I don't want to start a war in town." Ava shook her head. "This is harassment, Emma. You deserve to feel safe. Let me at least put the word out." Emma hesitated, but eventually agreed. She had too much on her plate, her physical therapy, her volunteer work, and the emotional fallout of transitioning to civilian life. A little backup didn't sound like a bad idea. Ava wasted no time contacting her network on Camp Lejeune. She called Staff Sergeant Miguel Ramirez, a Marine known for his fierce loyalty and protective nature. Ramirez listened to Ava's story and was outraged to hear how Emma, a wounded veteran who had sacrificed so much, was being treated. "This is not going to stand," he said firmly. "Nobody harasses one of our own." Soon whispers spread through the base. Marines who had never met Emma were talking about the army medic in the wheelchair who was getting hassled in town. Several expressed the desire to do something, anything to show solidarity. Some suggested organizing a group to escort Emma whenever she went out. Others wanted to confront the bullies directly. After a few phone calls, they decided to coordinate with Ava and Emma for a more strategic approach. Unaware of the flurry of activity happening behind the scenes, Emma continued her daily routine. The menacing presence of Trent and his buddies still loomed. She feared that at any moment they might jump her in an alley or catch her alone at a gas station. But a tiny spark of hope ignited in her chest. She was not alone in this fight. The turning point came one crisp afternoon when Emma was leaving the VA clinic. She had stayed late to talk to a recently discharged Marine struggling with PTSD. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the nearly empty parking lot. As she wheeled toward her car, she spotted Trent's truck. Her heart sank. Sitting on the hood were Trent and his two cronies. Their expressions were grim, full of twisted pleasure at cornering their target. Emma's pulse quickened. She debated going back into the clinic to call for help, but she wasn't sure if they'd follow her inside. Her phone was in her backpack, stowed behind her wheelchair. She tried to appear calm, rolling forward slowly. Trent hopped off the hood and blocked her path. "You thought the diner was bad?" he sneered. "We're just getting started." The other two men flanked Emma, effectively surrounding her. She gripped the push rims of her wheelchair, tightly scanning her surroundings for any passers-by. The parking lot lights flickered on, illuminating the grim set of Trent's jaw. "You're not wanted here," he said, voice low and dangerous. "We see you buddying up with the Marines. Think that scares us?" Emma swallowed hard, doing her best to keep fear from her face. "Leave me alone." Emma managed her voice, trembling slightly. "I've done nothing to you." Trent snorted. "You exist. That's enough." Emma felt her blood run cold. She was no stranger to conflict, but the raw hatred in Trent's eyes was unnerving in a way she hadn't felt since combat. For a moment, she found herself flashing back to Afghanistan, her heart pounding as mortars fell. But then came the voice of reason, the voice she'd cultivated during her darkest hours. "You are strong. You are trained. You are not alone." "I served my country," Emma said, trying to steady her tone. "I bled for it. What have you done for this community, besides harassing innocent people?" That struck a nerve. One of Trent's buddies scowled and lunged forward, causing Emma to flinch. The man didn't lay a hand on her yet, but the tension in his body suggested he was ready for violence. Trent raised a hand, signaling his friend to hold back. "You think you're tough because you saw some action overseas. We've had enough of you. This is our town." Emma set her jaw, refusing to break eye contact. She sensed that reasoning with them was pointless. Deep-seated prejudice and resentment burned in their eyes, fueling an illogical rage she couldn't talk them out of. But Emma was done running. Her heart pounding. Emma slowly reached behind her wheelchair, fishing for her phone in the backpack's side pocket. The men tightened their circle, sensing her move. Trent's scowling friend looked ready to yank her bag away, but Emma found her phone just in time. She quickly tapped Ava's contact, hoping and praying it would connect. "You calling the cops?" Trent sneered, leaning in closer. "They won't do a damn thing." Emma couldn't even respond. Her throat felt tight. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, Ava picked up. "Emma. Everything okay?" The relief that washed over Emma was immediate, but she kept her composure. "I'm outside the clinic," she said tersely. "They're here." Ava didn't need more details. "I'm on my way," she replied, her voice taut. "Just hang in there." Emma ended the call, hoping Ava had the sense to call others for backup. Trent, noticing her calm defiance, scoffed. "Whoever you called better hurry," he said with a twisted grin, "because you've got nowhere to run." With the sun almost gone, the parking lot was bathed in the artificial glow of overhead lamps. Trent's truck glinted ominously. Emma's mind raced with survival tactics. She'd seen men do far worse than threaten in her time on the battlefield, and she braced herself for physical harm. If they attacked, how could she defend herself from a wheelchair? She mentally catalogued her environment. The steel rims on her wheelchair, the heavy set of keys in her lap, the small can of pepper spray on her keychain. Not the best arsenal, but it was something. Time stretched painfully. Emma was aware of the faint hum of traffic from a nearby highway. Trent and his friends seemed to toy with her stepping in and out of her personal space, exchanging taunts. Then the sound of a car engine roared into the parking lot. Emma turned her head to see a sedan screech to a stop near the curb. Out jumped Ava, her face etched with fury. "Back off," she shouted, marching toward them. Trent's eyes flicked to Ava, and a sneer distorted his features. "Mind your business," he growled, but Ava wasn't alone. One by one, more cars arrived. A handful of Marines from Camp Lejeune, dressed in civilian clothes but unmistakably military in their bearing, emerged. Emma recognized Staff Sergeant Ramirez among them, his eyes scanning the situation quickly. The moment Staff Sergeant Ramirez and the other Marines stepped out, the energy in the parking lot shifted drastically. Although they wore jeans, t-shirts, and casual jackets, their erect posture and intense gazes made it clear they were not to be trifled with. Even Trent's arrogance wavered for a second as he realized they were outnumbered and outmatched in both skill and discipline. Ramirez strode forward, placing himself protectively between Emma and her tormentors. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone measured but loaded with warning. Trent hesitated, looking to his buddies for backup. The stocky one shuffled his feet, and the lanky man glared at the Marines, but none spoke. Ava positioned herself beside Ramirez, crossing her arms. You're harassing a disabled veteran, a hero who served this country. Do you have any idea how pathetic that is?" Her voice trembled with rage. The silent standoff stretched for a few heartbeats longer, and Emma could almost see Trent's ego wrestling with the sudden reality that they were outnumbered. For a moment, Emma wondered if he would attempt some reckless act of violence. But the presence of multiple Marines in prime fighting shape seemed to dull his bravado. Trent's friends, sensing the confrontation had turned against them, began edging toward their truck. Trent lingered, refusing to lose face in front of Emma. He looked at her wheelchair with a twisted mixture of contempt and regret, as though blaming her for the situation he'd created. "This ain't over," he muttered, trying to project menace, but it fell flat against the imposing line of Marines glaring at him. Finally, he spun on his heels and stormed back to his truck with his buddies in tow. The roar of their engine shattered the tense silence as the truck sped out of the parking lot. Emma let out a long, shaky breath, realizing only then how tightly she'd been gripping her phone. Ava rushed over immediately, bending down to check on Emma. "Are you all right?" she asked, concern etched on her face. Emma nodded, though her hands still trembled with adrenaline. "I'm okay," she managed softly. Staff Sergeant Ramirez crouched down beside them. "We're sorry we didn't get here sooner," he said, his voice gentle compared to the steely resolve he'd shown moments before. Emma offered a wan smile. "I'm just glad you came at all," she replied. The cluster of Marines and Emma's friend Ava formed a protective circle around her, helping her to her car. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt something besides fear. She felt safe and supported. As the Marines ensured Emma got into her adapted car without further harassment, a small crowd began to form near the clinic's entrance, staff members and veterans who had heard the commotion, but were too afraid to step outside earlier. The presence of so many uniformed individuals, or those who bore the unmistakable aura of the military, gave them the courage to venture out now. "Doc, are you okay?" asked a fellow volunteer, a Vietnam veteran named Paul. His voice quivered, reflecting guilt that he hadn't intervened. Emma nodded, her composure returning. "I'm fine, Paul. Thanks to these guys." She gestured toward Ramirez and the others. One of the Marines, a tall woman with a commanding presence, introduced herself as Corporal Nguyen. "We heard Emma might be in trouble," she said simply, "and we came." A hush fell over the small crowd. The clinic director, a former Navy corpsman, stepped forward. "I want to personally thank all of you for standing up for Emma," he said, shaking Ramirez's hand. The staff and veterans nodded in agreement. Emma felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over her. While the bullies had aimed to make her feel isolated, this moment reaffirmed her belief in collective support. She was not fighting this battle alone. That night, Emma tried to wind down in her apartment, but her mind replayed the parking lot incident in loop. Despite the Marines' timely intervention, a question gnawed at her. What happens next time? Trent had promised it wasn't over, and Emma believed him. She didn't want to be the cause of any more drama, nor did she want to risk the Marines' safety by having them constantly guard her. But she also couldn't live in fear. She confided in Ava. "I appreciate everything you've all done, but I can't have you guys dropping everything to be my personal security detail." Ava considered this. Her brow furrowed. "We don't mind helping, Emma. You've done so much for others. This is our turn to help you. Still, I understand your concerns." They brainstormed together, deciding on a more subtle strategy. Whenever Emma needed to run errands or go somewhere potentially risky, she would text Ava a heads up. Ava, in turn, would see if any Marines or other vets were available to accompany Emma discreetly. It was a rotation system of sorts, a community watch. Emma felt a pang of guilt relying on others for her safety. But she also knew that sometimes strength comes from community rather than solitude. Over the following weeks, Emma found herself unexpectedly surrounded by new friends, an extended family, really. Marines and veterans from different branches began popping up at her volunteer events, sitting with her at the diner, and even accompanying her to the grocery store. At first, she worried it would draw more attention, but the support felt genuine, never forced. Their presence deterred Trent's gang, who seemed hesitant to provoke a large group of disciplined fighters. One day, Emma was hosting a small workshop at the VA clinic on coping strategies for new amputees and wheelchair users. To her surprise, half a dozen Marines attended, not because they themselves needed the information, but because they wanted to understand what Emma and other disabled vets were going through. They asked questions about wheelchair maintenance, accessible transportation, and how to assist someone without undermining their independence. By the end of the workshop, Emma felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. Their genuine desire to learn was an affirmation that she still had a vital role to play in the service community, if not on the battlefield, then in the fight for improved veterans' welfare. While Emma's circle of supporters expanded, Trent's bitterness grew. He brooded in his dingy trailer on the outskirts of town, nursing cheap beer and letting his anger fester. The presence of Marines and other vets around Emma only fueled his paranoia that his hometown was being overrun by outsiders. He ranted to his buddies about those uniformed freaks taking over, but even they began to tire of his obsession. Unable to let it go, Trent started stalking Emma on social media. He discovered pictures of her at volunteer events, flanked by smiling veterans. He found posts praising her work at the clinic, with grateful comments from people she had helped. Each photo and comment felt like a personal affront to Trent, a reminder that Emma commanded more respect in a wheelchair than he ever had on his own 2 feet. His rage blinded him to the fact that Emma had earned that respect through service and sacrifice. One night, emboldened by alcohol and his twisted sense of entitlement, Trent convinced his remaining loyal buddy to help him teach her another lesson. This time, he planned something bigger than graffiti or verbal threats. It happened on a Tuesday evening, just as Emma was heading home from a late shift at the VA clinic. She turned down a quiet street that led to her apartment complex, the streetlights casting soft pools of illumination on the pavement. Engrossed in thought about a veteran she'd counseled that day, she almost didn't notice the rusted pickup truck tailing her. In a blink, the truck sped up, swerving to block Emma's path. The driver's door flung open, and Trent leapt out. Before Emma could react, he yanked open her car door and tried to pull her out. She screamed, fumbling for her pepper spray. Her wheelchair was strapped in the back seat, making a quick escape impossible. Trent's buddy circled the truck, brandishing a metal pipe. Emma's mind raced with fear and fury. Is this how it ends? She fought back, scratching at Trent's arms and wriggling to reach her spray. The pipe slammed into her steering wheel, cracking the horn. The chaotic noise might have saved her life. It blared through the night, alerting a nearby resident who dialed 911. Finally, Emma got a grip on her pepper spray and unleashed it into Trent's face. He let out a roar of pain, releasing her long enough for Emma to grab her phone. But Trent's buddy was still swinging the pipe, smashing her side mirror in a shower of glass. Emma crouched as low as she could, yelling for help. The screech of tires sounded at the end of the street, and headlights flooded the scene. Emma glanced up, to see two cars skid to a stop. Out jumped Ava Ramirez and a pair of Marines who had been at the clinic earlier. They had been driving home when they heard Emma's honking. Ramirez rushed forward, tackling Trent's buddy, who was armed with the pipe. Ava grabbed hold of Trent, who was still reeling from the pepper spray, and wrestled him to the ground. Emma's breath came in ragged gasps. She could hardly process the blur of movement as the Marines subdued the attackers with precise, practiced efficiency. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Trent and his buddy found themselves pinned to the ground. Their bravado vanished in the face of real opposition. Ava glanced at Emma relief washing over her features when she saw Emma still conscious and moving. "Hang in there, Emma," Ava called out. "We've got you." Police cruisers arrived moments later, their red and blue lights painting the dark street in frantic hues. Officers bounded out, drawing their weapons before realizing the situation was under control, courtesy of Ramirez and his fellow Marines. Once disarmed, Trent and his accomplice were handcuffed and placed in separate squad cars. Emma sat in her driver's seat, trembling, her wheelchair still strapped in the back. Paramedics arrived to check her for injuries. Though shaken and bruised, she was mostly unharmed thanks to the timely intervention of her friends. Meanwhile, neighbors who had gathered at a distance began murmuring in shock. News spread quickly on social media that the disabled vet who volunteered at the VA clinic had been attacked and that Marines had come to her rescue. The following day, local news outlets picked up the story. Headlines blared, "Veteran in wheelchair attacked Marines. Step in." Talk radio hosts debated how the police could have prevented this. Community members flooded online forums with outrage and demands for justice. Some offered Emma free car repairs, meals, and even donations to help cover any medical expenses. Emma was overwhelmed by the kindness pouring in from strangers. Yet she also felt a simmering anger at the fact it had to come to this. She had tried to warn people about Trent, but only a few listened. Within days, details of the attack went viral on social media. People from around the country denounced Trent and his accomplices for targeting a disabled veteran, especially one who'd nearly lost her life serving overseas. Hashtags like Justice for Emma and #StandWithVets trended briefly in local circles. Rallies were held in front of the courthouse where Trent's bail hearing took place. Veterans organizations, including the Wounded Warrior Project, issued statements condemning the attack and calling for stricter penalties for hate crimes against disabled vets. Politicians in North Carolina's state legislature took note, proposing new measures to increase protections for disabled individuals and veterans. The police chief of Crystal Falls, under immense pressure, held a press conference promising a thorough investigation into Trent's past actions, including the previous harassment Emma had reported. Meanwhile, Trent faced a laundry list of charges: assault with a deadly weapon, assault on a disabled person, and more. His bail was set high, and public opinion turned decisively against him. His own employer, a local construction company, announced they had terminated his position, citing a zero-tolerance policy for violence. In a small town like Crystal Falls, such infamy was hard to escape. Karma had come swiftly, and it was unrelenting. While the community rallied around her, Emma wrestled with her own feelings of vulnerability, guilt, and relief. On one hand, she was grateful to be alive and to see justice taking shape. On the other, she felt overwhelmed by the sudden spotlight. Reporters called her phone non-stop, and well-wishers dropped by the VA clinic with gifts and messages of support. Post-traumatic stress also gnawed at the edges of her mind. She was already managing the physical limitations of her wheelchair, along with the emotional scars of war. Now she had to process the fact she'd nearly been killed in her own hometown. "I feel like I never truly left the battlefield," she confided to Ava one evening. The threats just changed faces. Ava and Ramirez, who had become fixtures in her life, insisted that Emma take time for self-care. They encouraged her to speak with a therapist, someone who specialized in military trauma. Reluctantly, Emma agreed. In therapy sessions, she explored her tumultuous emotions, confronting guilt over having to rely on others for help, anger at Trent's cruelty, and gratitude that she had found a community that would fight for her. Slowly, she began to heal. In the weeks that followed, Emma's courage and resilience became a symbol of hope in Crystal Falls. The mayor invited her to speak at a town hall meeting on improving relations between civilians and the military community. Although public speaking wasn't Emma's favorite activity, she recognized the importance of bridging these divides. She rolled onto the stage in her wheelchair, her uniform ribbons pinned to her blazer, and spoke from the heart. She talked about her service, her injury, and her passion for helping other veterans. She also addressed the hatred she'd faced and the unwavering support she received from the Marines. "This isn't just about me," she said, voice quivering slightly. "It's about all of us coming together to stand up to prejudice and violence. I may be in a wheelchair, but I'm not powerless. None of us are, if we stand together." By the time she finished, a standing ovation erupted from the crowd. Even those who had been skeptical of the military presence in Crystal Falls found themselves moved by Emma's sincerity. Her story was a testament to bravery and unity, lighting a spark of optimism in a community that had been divided. Motivated by Emma's speech, local businesses started offering discounts or accommodations for disabled veterans. The town council allocated funds to renovate public buildings and add ramps, wider doorways, and other accessibility features. A wave of generosity swept through the community. Neighbors helped neighbors, and service members and civilians formed new bonds through volunteer projects. Emma saw an opportunity to expand her advocacy. She partnered with Staff Sergeant Ramirez and Corporal Nguyen to create a veterans outreach event. With the support of the mayor's office, they organized a weekend fair on the main street of Crystal Falls. Local restaurants provided free samples, while representatives from VA services set up booths offering information on healthcare counseling and job training. The Marines performed demonstrations from physical fitness challenges to canine handling, drawing large crowds. Hundreds of people showed up, including families, eager to show their kids what real heroes looked like. Emma shared her story at a booth designated for veterans' voices, encouraging others to seek help, share experiences, and build a community of solidarity. The fair was a resounding success, and Emma's face lit up with pride at the sight of so many different people uniting for a common cause. Trent's court date arrived amid intense public scrutiny. The prosecutor backed by evidence from the parking lot assault, and Emma's earlier reports presented a compelling case. There was also damning surveillance footage from a nearby building that caught Trent in the act of pulling Emma from her car. With nowhere to hide, Trent's defense crumbled. He pled guilty to multiple charges, hoping for a lighter sentence. When sentencing day came, the judge condemned Trent's actions as deplorable, hateful, and a gross violation of human decency. Trent received a multi-year prison sentence, and his accomplice was given a slightly lesser term, but still faced serious jail time. The moral of the story was clear to everyone in Crystal Falls: targeting a disabled veteran, especially one so beloved in the community, was a mistake that came with heavy consequences. The men who once terrorized Emma now found themselves ostracized and locked up. The ripple effect on the community was profound. People began re-evaluating their own biases, questioning whether small acts of unkindness could escalate into something more dangerous. In that sense, Trent's downfall served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that hatred cannot be tolerated. After the trial, Emma took a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. The media spotlight had faded, life in Crystal Falls had settled back into a gentle rhythm, and Emma's everyday concerns returned to her volunteer work and personal health. She was determined not to let the experience overshadow her life, nor define her as a perpetual victim. She resumed her weekly routine at the VA clinic, offering her compassionate listening ear and medical knowledge to veterans adjusting to civilian life. She also found solace in the nature trails around Crystal Falls, often rolling along with Ava or Ramirez by her side. The once looming fear was replaced by a sense of security, built on genuine friendships and communal support. Occasionally, Emma was recognized on the street. People would approach and thank her for standing up to bullies, or for her service in the army, or for inspiring them to be more empathetic. Each kind word chipped away at the lingering trauma, reminding her that she was respected and valued. A year after the attack, Emma was presented with an unexpected opportunity. The director of the VA clinic was retiring, and the board wanted Emma to consider a leadership position. She was stunned. "I'm not even 30, and I'm in a wheelchair," she protested. But the board members insisted her passion, experience, and willingness to fight for veterans made her the ideal candidate. After careful thought, Emma accepted. She dove into the role with the same dedication that had earned her top marks in the army. She hired more staff psychologists, expanded the clinic's outreach, and partnered with local businesses to create veteran-friendly job fairs. Her leadership transformed the clinic into a state-of-the-art hub of hope and healing for service members across the county. While Emma navigated administrative tasks, her heart remained with the veterans who walked, wheeled, or limped through the clinic's doors. She never stopped listening to their stories, connecting with them on a personal level. Hers was a leadership of empathy built on shared struggles and triumphs. During her first year as director, Emma spearheaded a fundraiser to help renovate the home of a double amputee Marine. Word of her unceasing compassion reached the local newspaper, and they did a feature piece on her efforts. Businesses donated materials, volunteers showed up in droves, and the home was retrofitted with ramps, handrails, and wider doorways. When the Marine moved back in, tears streamed down his face in gratitude. Emma also launched a mentorship program that paired wounded veterans with high school students interested in military service or medical careers. The initiative was a smash hit, forging cross-generational bonds that enriched both the young and the old. For Emma, watching these connections bloom felt like a fulfilling extension of her original dream to serve something bigger than herself. The battlefield might have changed, but her mission to save lives and uplift others continued in the heart of Crystal Falls. Despite her successes, Emma was still human. Nightmares of the attack sometimes woke her in a cold sweat, and the memory of Afghanistan's battlefields remained etched in her mind. Therapy sessions continued, and she regularly practiced mindfulness techniques taught by a local meditation group. Over time, the raw edges of her trauma softened, replaced by a deeper understanding of her own resilience. One day, she visited a veteran friend at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, the very hospital where she'd spent her darkest days. Walking the halls, or rather, wheeling through them, stirred an emotional cocktail of sorrow, nostalgia, and gratitude. She thought about how far she'd come from a newly disabled soldier, unsure of her future, to a prominent community leader and advocate. She met with nurses and doctors who remembered her, all amazed at her transformation. In that moment, Emma felt a sense of closure, as though she'd finally woven the threads of her past into a powerful tapestry of present-day purpose. With Crystal Falls thriving under her guidance, Emma began receiving invitations to speak at events outside North Carolina. Veteran advocacy groups asked her to share her story at conferences. Universities invited her for lectures on leadership and diversity in the military. While Emma was initially intimidated by the spotlight, she recognized the platform it offered. If her story could inspire change, she was willing to step up. She traveled to Washington, D.C., to speak at an event sponsored by the Wounded Warrior Project. Standing on stage, she saw hundreds of veterans, active duty personnel, and politicians. She spoke of sacrifice service and the unwavering support she'd found among Marines' fellow vets and the Crystal Falls community. She recounted how hatred had nearly stolen her sense of safety, but the communal stand against prejudice restored her faith in humanity. Her words resonated deeply. A line of people formed afterward, each person eager to share how her story had touched them. Some wanted to hug her. Others asked for advice on dealing with their own bullies or PTSD. Emma took her time, with each individual her capacity for empathy never running dry. Despite the increasing recognition and invitations, Emma never saw herself as a celebrity. She remained rooted in humility, crediting the Marines Eva Ramirez and countless others for rallying to her side. She always emphasized that true change was a collective effort, not the work of one person. She continued to work late hours at the VA clinic, sometimes sleeping in her office after a particularly busy day. She still made time to counsel younger veterans one-on-one, reminding herself that each conversation could be the lifeline someone desperately needed. Occasionally, she'd bump into people around town who had once been aloof or suspicious about the military presence. Now they greeted her warmly, sometimes apologizing if they had harbored misconceptions in the past. In this way, Emma's life became an ongoing testament to how adversity, when met with resilience and communal solidarity, could transform not just one person, but an entire town. At Ramirez's insistence, Emma was invited to Camp Lejeune to attend a special ceremony, honoring civilian allies and partners of the Marines. Stepping onto the base brought back memories of how the Marines had come to her rescue that night in the clinic parking lot, and again during the attempted assault. Emma felt a surge of gratitude with each step or wheel turn she took. During the ceremony, the commanding officer of Camp Lejeune praised Emma's tireless advocacy for veterans and her role in fostering better relations between the base and Crystal Falls. To Emma's surprise, she was awarded an honorary plaque inscribed with a simple but powerful message: "In gratitude for your unwavering dedication to our brothers and sisters in arms." Tears prickled in Emma's eyes as she accepted the plaque. She thought back to the day she nearly lost her life in Afghanistan, the heartbreaking reality of her spinal injury, and the harrowing moment when Trent's hatred almost ended her story. Here she was, now standing tall in spirit, if not on her own 2 feet, recognized by the very people who had pledged to protect her when it mattered most. Later that evening, Emma and Ava took a quiet drive along the coast, the ocean waves illuminated by moonlight. They talked about everything life destiny, the cost of war, and the beauty of finding family in unexpected places. Emma rested her hand on the plaque sitting in her lap. "Sometimes I wonder if all of this happened for a reason," she said, softly. Ava turned to her eyes, reflecting the silver glow of moonlight. "I don't know about fate," she replied, "but I do know that you've turned hardship into a force for good. You took the worst life threw at you both on the battlefield and here at home and used it to inspire change. That's rare," Emma. Emma gazed out at the rolling waves. I guess I just never wanted to be defined by my limitations, she mused. And maybe that's what makes a warrior right. Always pushing past the obstacles, never letting them break you. Ava smiled. Semper Fi Emma. It was the Marines' motto, but it fit Emma just as well, always faithful. In the end, the story of Emma Davis and the Bullies of Crystal Falls wasn't just about a violent confrontation. It was about the transformative power of unity, empathy, and honor. The Marines who showed up that night didn't just rescue Emma. They helped mend a community torn by distrust. Emma in turn taught them that even those confined to wheelchairs could stand tall in spirit, leading by example, and bringing people together. In time, the events became local legend, told in high school assemblies to discourage hate recounted at barbecues, to highlight the importance of community, and referenced in town council meetings whenever budgets were allocated for veteran services. Emma herself, now a fixture of Crystal Falls life, carried on tirelessly advocating for greater inclusion and respect for all disabled individuals, not just veterans. She knew that bullies would always exist in some form, in some place, but she also knew there would always be good people ready to stand against them. Thus, a small town's act of solidarity became a beacon of hope. And whenever someone asked Emma how she maintained her calm and courage through it all, she would smile and say, "I've seen the worst of humanity. I've also seen the best. The best is worth fighting for, worth living for, and worth believing in every single day." Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of hardship, heroism, and healing. Emma Davis's story shows us that resilience can triumph over hate and that unity can conquer the darkest of trials. When we stand shoulder to shoulder, whether in uniform or as civilians, we form an unbreakable shield against those who seek to spread fear. If this story moved you, please like this video to show support for every veteran who has sacrificed so much. Share it with friends and family to remind them that compassion can rewrite even the most painful chapters of our lives. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the triumph of the human spirit. Let's continue fostering hope and solidarity. Together we can uplift each other and protect the very core of our shared humanity.